Welcome, everybody. So happy all of you could join us for the webinar. I'm Judy Browse. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and we also serve as the Secretariat of the GEEP, the Global Environmental Education Partnership. And today you are so lucky to be here for this wonderful lineup of speakers where we are going to be talking about education bright spots, the circular economy solutions from across Africa. And we do have three wonderful speakers, and Cindy will introduce the speakers in just a minute. But I also want to give a big thank you to Cindy, who is our moderator, and I'll introduce her a little bit more in a minute, and Caleb, who is a PhD student at the University of Florida, and he has been helping GEEP Africa with so many things, including our webinar series. So thank you both so much. And I also want to just thank the NAAEE team. Ann Umali is the Director of Professional Development, Conservation, and International Programs. And Madeline is our Senior Specialist of International Programs. Couldn't have a better team working on these programs. Fantastic. And this is our GEEP Africa team. MJ, who introduced himself in the chat, is from the University of Botswana. He has been part of GEEP since the beginning. And we have Adedoyin, Cindy, and Ravi, who have all been wonderful colleagues trying to strengthen environmental education across the continent. And you can find out more about GEEP Africa on the website, but really working to strengthen environmental education and bring new thinking and speakers to this webinar series across the continent. There's so much to do and so many good people doing really wonderful work. Just a little housekeeping here. This is Zoom. There's a chat where you can talk to us. Everybody is muted because it's a webinar. You can ask questions, put resources in, comments, and we also have closed captioning. If English is not your first, second, or third language, you need help. There are 31 choices to choose from. So you can just go into the closed captioning. If you need help, just send us a note in the chat. And just a few minutes on GEEP. This is the Global Environmental Education Partnership. It is really a learning network. It's really designed to strengthen environmental education around the world and share effective practice across borders. And there's so many partners that are part of the GEEP. There are partners of networks, there are partners that are advisors, and we try to share, learn from each other, and just keep strengthening the field of environmental education and using education as a powerful tool. And we do have experts, advisors from all over the world that are really terrific and have been meeting and discussing and thinking about what can we do together to strengthen the work we do and help people understand the environmental and social issues that we're facing. And we try to provide that space for leaders to come together and think creatively about solutions. And we are trying also to spark not only collaboration, but innovation in this field. There are so many issues. It's easy to get a little depressed about it. And we are trying to keep that optimism up there and realize we all have a role to play and there's so much we can do together. So GEEP is a network of networks trying to reach out around the world to bring people in and help us better understand each other. You can go to the GEEP website at thejeep.org to find out more about the resources and the work of the GEEP, and we'd love to have you join. And I just wanted to mention too, one of our great partners is the Ministry of Environment in Taiwan. And there are three themes that they are working on this year, and we are trying to help support all of these themes, including the circular economy, food waste, and green life. And there's so many things under each of these big headings that we can do as educators of thinking about kind of the ag and food and environment connection, and so many things that educators can do, students can do, learners of all ages thinking about the food waste issue. Or if we think about green life, this is really thinking about what we do in our daily lives, whether it's what we eat, travel, consumption. Many of us in offices are using a lot of energy and paper. And it's just really thinking about how we live our lives and how we can do that in a more environmentally friendly way. And then today we're going to be talking about the circular economy. And Taiwan has done a number of things GEEP has done a number of things, and we're really excited today to have this wonderful panel to talk about different solutions to some of the circular economy issues that we're all facing. And I am so excited to introduce Cindy, who is the CEO of the Wildlife and Environment Society in South Africa. Cindy has been a leader in environmental education for years, and she loves the power of education and meeting people where they're at. And I can't tell you how wonderful has been to work with Cindy. And many, many, many years ago, Cindy was a fellow with NAAEE in Washington, D.C., and we have stayed in touch forever. So, Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being the moderator, and thank you for being here today and for all you do.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world joining us today. It is a really good spread in terms of like representation across the world. I'm quite excited because we've got a nice spread of like innovation and solutions across Africa. So we've got Southern Africa represented by South Africa, East Africa represented, as well as West Africa represented through our speakers today. So really keen to get into our discussions today. I will try and keep my role here as brief as possible so that we can get to our guest speakers. But just for everybody who's joining us, please drop your name and introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat, where you're from, and what organization you represent, because it would be great to see how this topic around how environmental education is driving the circular economy across Africa can support you, but also how you can essentially help us co-learn from your side of the world, whether it's on the continent or elsewhere. It'd be really great to engage with you in the chat. The webinar today, as I discussed, is, and Judy so nicely introduced us to, will be about the circular economy and education's role within the circular economy across Africa. I think we've seen a lot of really innovative ways that people are developing solutions, local solutions, international solutions to solve the problems of waste through the circular economy, local solutions that essentially drives the principles of the circular economy into practice. Sometimes it can be quite a lofty concept to understand what the circular economy is, but we'll let the experts and our panelists today help us understand it a little bit better, and also give us some examples in terms of like how they're doing it across the continent. So in this webinar today, you'll hear about 3 inspiring educators from across Africa who are leading their Bright Spots initiatives in their own communities, and that's really what this is about. Judy spoke about a network of networks that can co-learn together. And this is really why these sessions are so important for the GEEP and GEEP Africa particularly, is how do we learn from each other to find African solutions to African problems, and how can we learn from the rest of the world in terms of like the solutions that are implemented elsewhere that we could replicate and modify to like make it an African solution for an African problem. So in today's session, they'll share practical examples of how they are integrating the circular economy principles into schools, community programs, environmental education initiatives, and the lessons that they've learned along the way. And I think that is also the most important thing about these webinars, is how can we share what we've learned along the way with each other, so that I don't make the same mistakes that Linda made, and Linda can give me a little bit of a head start in terms of like what she had to overcome. So that's also a big part of the GEEP Africa and GEEP webinars, to make sure that we learn from each other as we go along our journeys. So whether you work in the formal or non-formal education space, this session will provide some ideas, definitely some inspiration and practical strategies for helping learners understand, helping communities understand our individual roles towards how we bring education towards this concept and the principles of the circular economy. So with that introduction, I would like to introduce Professor Linda Godfrey, who is a principal scientist at the CSIR, which is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa. And she also holds a PhD in engineering, which is pretty extraordinary. It's not every day that I get to meet an engineer with a PhD that is a woman. So it's Women's Month in South Africa. So I also celebrate Linda for having a PhD in engineering, because I believe that women leaders or women who are leaders in the sector is what needed to like show how leadership can be differently done in the spaces, like, for example, circular economy, using an engineering lens. So Linda has recognized and managed circular innovations in South Africa, supporting the implementation of South Africa's circular economy science, technology, and innovation strategy. She's a passionate communicator and a prolific author. She brings unique insights to how circular strategies can address developmental, environmental sustainability, and social equity. Very important, because we know that things like pollution, litter, circular economy is not just a wicked environmental problem, but they intersect with our social lives and our economy. So, Linda, I would like to hand over to you to introduce us to circular economy and a formal education approach to circular economy in South Africa.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Let me share my screen while we are doing that. And thank you for the lovely introduction. All right, I think we should be there.
Almost.
You can just tell me if you can see it and if it's on full screen.
I can see it, but you just have to put it in full screen. Thanks, Linda. There we go.
Oh, golly. Okay. All right. Just a little bit delayed, but in full screen. So thank you, first of all, so much for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon to talk about this topic, such an important topic. And I'm going to try to do my best to get it in under 10 minutes. But I think, this is the kind of thing we could spend days talking about. Also, just tell me my slide should have also moved on in case it hasn't on your side.
It has, Linda.
Perfect. Thank you. So everyone who has seen me present knows that I always start my presentations with this slide. And I think it's to get us all on the same page, to confirm that when we talk about the circular economy, we aren't only talking about waste management. And certainly the circular economy is not a synonym for recycling. I think it's important that we take this approach of understanding the circular economy as being really about sustainable resource management. And I go so far as to say that the circular economy is actually about national resource security in support of socio-economic development. It's about understanding the resources that we have as a country, as a region, as a city, as a community. It's about rethinking our relationship with the resources that we use. And it's about asking these fundamental questions of, do we actually have the resources that we need to achieve our development objectives? And are we using our resources in the best interests of our people to support socioeconomic development? So at least our approach to the circular economy has been this very broad one in South Africa that I'm incredibly appreciative of. So why is the circular economy so important for Africa? I think, first of all, the circular economy speaks to these issues around how we produce, how we consume food and feed. And it asks us to produce these in a more sustainable, in a more regenerative approach. So to rethink farming practices on the continent that lowers the water intensity, energy intensity, materials intensity, that keeps the diversity of the crops, for example, that we produce alive and vibrant on the economy, that reduces issues like food losses and waste. And again, we could have a whole separate discussion on that. It's also critical to think about the circular economy when we think about the future of our cities and towns. And so there is this figure that's thrown around that says 70 to 80%, and whether it's 70 to 80, whether it's 50 to 60, 67, the fact is the majority of buildings that will stand in Africa in 2050 are still to be built. So how do we build those cities of the future? How do we build them in a way that is less resource intensive, more climate resilient, that is more livable, more workable, more walkable, for example? So it's about thinking how we use our resources in the context of our cities and towns. It's about thinking the future of our mineral resources. And we've seen a lot of attention paid to this over the last year or two in terms of Africa's critical minerals, for example, and how those are used, and whether those resources are being used in the best interests of the people of those countries. And then lastly, or not lastly, but at least the fourth example I've provided here is how do we create clean and healthy environments for our population, for our communities, for example, to reduce the burden of disease, to reduce the environmental impacts that are so often associated with the mismanagement of waste. And so when you look at these examples, you can see how it reconfirms that point that the circular economy is not just about waste management, and it's certainly not just a synonym for recycling. And so with that as framing, what you do find is that for many countries, their entry point into the circular economy has been a waste entry point. It's the low-hanging fruit in terms of resources and secondary resources. So back in 2015, our Department of Science and Technology developed what was called the Waste Research Development and Innovation Roadmap. It was a 10-year roadmap, and that recognized the importance of strategically investing in waste-related science, technology, and innovation. And it had three focus areas that I think are of relevance to the discussion today. The first was around strengthening capability and capacity. It was around supporting effective decision-making through scientific evidence, and it was around faster insertion of context-appropriate technology for our country. And I think it's the first one that I want to touch on today, because while there was a lot of activity that happened around R&D and around technology development and implementation, this point around capability development was so critical because I think it outlives the others. If we are truly going to change a sector, if we are truly going to achieve those aspirations of diverting waste away from landfill, of a clean environment, of sustainable resource management, probably the best way to do that is to change it from within, of producing skilled professionals, skilled students, educators that will change that sector from within through their learning and understanding of the particular problems. And so that's what we did. It was one of the core pillars of the roadmap. And so we invested in our next generation of professionals, our youth, and we did that through scholarships, through bursaries. Many of those were associated with particular research projects, but we've also had dedicated postgraduate degrees that have been implemented now in South Africa. There's an honors and 2 master's degrees. We've had SACHI chairs that have also had a large cohort of students that have worked under the leadership of those chairs. And so as at the end of March 2024, when the Waste Roadmap came to an end, 55 postgraduate students had already been funded and completed their degrees. Another 32 have since completed in the transition from the Waste Roadmap to the Circular Economy strategy. And there have been new students coming on board, and further 29 that were funded under the roadmap are in the final stages. So that's more than 100 postgraduate students that will go off and will hopefully improve the way waste is managed. And if they're not directly involved in waste, at least within broader environmental sustainability. Sadly, though, what we did see was that we had 25 students who withdrew before completing their degrees. And Cindy mentioned earlier that we're in Women's Month. 64% of those were female students. And I think it highlights the challenges that female students, young students in particular, face in terms of having to go back home for family responsibilities, or perhaps not being able to secure sufficient funding to continue their studies. And this is something that we continue to work hard at, of making sure that we have representation in the students that we support. It's not only about our students, though, but it's also about us building our educators, our researchers that will continue beyond this program to strengthen skills in the waste sector. And so we also supported researchers, academics through grant projects. At the end of March, there were 231 unique researchers that had benefited from these grant projects. And when we did a follow-up survey, 68% of those grant holders reported significant career trajectory improvements because of that investment in them. So again, this is really about investing in our future through skills development and capability development. It's also about strengthening not only the skills, but also the knowledge transfer of those skills into business and industry. And so this is just 4 examples. There are many more that you could see if you go onto our Waste Roadmap or Circular Economy webpage. But if we're investing in students and in researchers, how do we make sure that those skills also transfer into government, into business, into industry? And so it's about strengthening collaboration between our universities and our science councils, about the co-creation of projects that can support this transfer of knowledge between our more sort of formal traditional academia and the private sector. And so, you know, some of these, the refill station one was a it's a number of stores that have popped up where you can take your own container, you can fill it up, and very often with significant savings to you know, in terms of food costs for local community members, particularly in low income communities. But these are just some of the examples, and not necessarily time to go into all of those right now. And then, as I said, you know, waste is the easy entry point into the circular economy. When our waste roadmap was starting to come to an end, there was this acknowledgement by the South African government that the circular economy provided significant social and economic opportunities for the country. And so with that was born South Africa's new circular economy, science, technology, and innovation strategy, which came into effect in 2024. And that's also a 10-year strategy. And it has taken this very broad sustainable resource management approach. And once again, as with the waste roadmap, the circular economy strategy provides us with an opportunity to strengthen skills, not only just now in waste, but also when it comes to circular mining, circular manufacturing, and circular agriculture. We're exploring opportunities in circular cities as well, and still so much more potential beyond that to build it out into other resource-intensive economic sectors. So how do we work with our professionals? And we gave a presentation to a group of architects who are probably the last people you'd think would probably have an interest in the circular economy. But I think it speaks to this issue around circular cities and design, and all the way through to social scientists in terms of understanding the potential for job creation, benefits for communities, etc. And we will, as with the Waste Roadmap, continue to explore how we build the circular economy into university curricula and into short learning programs. So with that, and hopefully I'm still within my 10 minutes, I think my concluding thoughts is, well, first of all, if you take just one thing away from this, please, that the circular economy is not just about waste management, it's about sustainable resource management. But the circular economy, I think, calls for disruption. It calls for rethinking the way that we do things. It calls for innovation. It calls for system change. And so because of that, I think there's a very strong role for our national systems of innovation, for our universities, for our science councils. I think they are crucial in terms of evidencing our transition, for de-risking and scaling our solutions, and for developing new innovative circular economy solutions. But I think at the heart of it, the foundation of that transition is really the skilled workforce, whether it be in business, in government, in academia. And that's why, for me, I'm so passionate about investing in our future, investing in our youth who will go out and will hopefully drive that change from within. And that change that we want is this vision of a low carbon, circular, and sustainable future. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Linda. That is absolutely mind-boggling in terms of like some of the stats that you've shared. I'm going to open the floor for 1 or 2 questions to Linda particularly, but please also do drop your questions in the chat. Linda, I've got one question for you to get the juices flowing for everyone else, is from the capability and capacity perspective, what has kind of like been the biggest barrier to like upscale, small scale initiative, circular economy initiatives in South Africa? And is, you know, we always speak about the triple bottom line in sustainability, but like how does government, business and civil society and academia come together to make sure that we can actually scale up and eliminate these barriers that prevent us from scaling up?
Yeah, such a good question, that Cindy. So I think certainly, you know, when it comes to society, to communities, probably the biggest barrier there is changing behavior and kind of that resistance to do that. I always say that it's the private sector that's going to drive our transition to a circular economy Government's
Mm.
role is to create the right enabling environment for that to happen. And for the
Mhm.
private sector to do that, it has to make business sense. And so I
Of
think
course.
that's probably the second obstacle that we're facing is how do we make these kinds of practices attractive to business? And I also do say, and we'll continue to generate the evidence, but I believe it's going to be small business that disrupts this situation because for big business, they are very invested in the status quo. For them,
Yeah.
very often, it's about their business model is volume. How do we sell more stuff? How do we get consumers to buy more stuff? Whereas what we're seeing is a lot of small businesses come in that disrupt that thinking. And
Mm.
we're seeing small businesses emerge with circular business models that we probably would never have dreamt of 10 years ago or
Mm.
15 years ago. And I think there is so much potential for that in Africa to create businesses that deliver goods and services to consumers in a different way, in a less resource
Mm.
intensive way.
Mhm.
There's a strong overlap with the digital economy in doing
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
and a strong call for innovation. And so these young entrepreneurs as well, investing in them. And very often it's just exposing them to the ideas. I'm fortunate in that I get to chat to a lot of young entrepreneurs. And when you talk to them around, why do we own a washing machine? Why don't we pay per wash? For example,
Mhm.
why can't I rent my washing machine and more people could get access to appliances, for example, but not through an ownership model? Suddenly it's a
Yeah.
case of, seriously, I could do that as a business. So I think, yeah, it's exposing people to the potential of circular business models.
Okay, perfect. And I love the idea of a circular city, and I think that's something that we should definitely have a different conversation about. But I know that there's one question in the chat. Dinah, do you want to unmute and ask Linda a question? I'm happy to give you an opportunity to engage with her directly. Otherwise, you can just drop it in the chat. Does anybody else have any questions for Linda at this stage?
Yeah.
And I can't see the participants
Yeah.
with their hands up. So please, if you can just assist me with that.
Sure. Let me unmute Dinah. And Dinah, you're unmuted if you'd like to chime in with your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor. That was very, very important, and especially loved when you say that at the center of this, it's how we work with people to achieve circular economy for the future of our world, not just in Africa. So I'm from Kenya. I'm a researcher at Kenyatta University. I'm in the School of Environmental Studies, and I wanted to ask, from your experience, what is the most significant innovation you have seen that enables the informal waste worker to participate meaningfully in the circular economy, not just from a place of labor, but from a recognized partnership, or rather, how would this model work, especially in the business, private sector, um, sector, basically? I'm asking this also from my lens as an ESG leader in Africa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for
Great
that question.
question.
And again, we could have an entire afternoon discussion just on the role of the informal sector in the waste economy. So I think one of the things that I've been incredibly proud of is the work that has been done by academia in South Africa in support of the informal waste sector. Off the top of my mind, I think of Professor Melanie Sampson, Professor Rini Schenk, both social scientists working in this space and working very strongly with our waste sector associations. And I think there are two things that come to mind. Our researchers walked a journey with the informal sector of saying to them, what is it that you need? And what we thought the answer would be wasn't in fact the answer. They said to us they want essentially more money in their pocket at the end of the month, which means access to more material and cleaner material. If they have more money in their pocket at the end of the month, they can do the other things themselves that we thought would come up. And so how do you give informal waste pickers those two things, access to more material and to cleaner material? There was also a sense of acknowledgement of the role that they play. And so two of the things that came out of that process of working with them was the development of a national waste picker registration system where and again there's plenty that's been written on this and we can have an offline discussion around that, but it was around acknowledging them. They get a card which shows that they are registered on the system, and just that recognition and acknowledgement I think we so underestimated the importance to waste pickers. What came from that was then the acknowledgement that informal waste pickers have essentially been subsidizing the recycling value chain for decades by providing free collection of these materials. And so it was this point of saying, we feel that in some way we should be financially compensated, because if you were to achieve the regulated targets, government and business would have to pay the formal collectors to go and collect that material. So it would have been a cost to business to collect the material. And so through discussions, this issue of the EPR fee came into effect. I think the way that it was done, it was probably rushed. And so I think it was built into legislation too soon before we figured out exactly how to overcome some of the challenges of being able to compensate someone who by their very nature is invisible in the economy. I think we're still trying to grapple with those issues, and I think we're getting closer to a point where it's feasible. But I think those two things, a national waste picker registration system and payment for the services that they undertake in collecting the recyclables. So in addition to the amount that they earn when they go and sell the material at a buyback center, they are paid an additional amount on top of that for the role that they've played in collection. And that speaks to that point around how do we put more money in their pocket at the end of each month. Thank you for the question.
Linda. And just for Dina and everybody else, the EPR is the extended producer responsibility. I'm not sure if it's in the rest of the world, but it's in South Africa, and that's essentially the Linda, would you call it a little?
It forces producers to be, yes. It forces producers to be responsible for their products at end of life by putting money into the system. In its simplest terms. So many African countries are currently looking at EPR as a policy instrument to try to alleviate the burden of waste management on municipalities and on local government.
Awesome. So for all the African participants today, please check out the EPR in your country, extended producer responsibility legislations that's in the works in your countries at the moment, because that's also a way for you to essentially also access some funding for some projects in your countries. But thank you, Linda, so much for great presentation. We do have a couple of more questions for you, but we'll take them at the end. What I would like to do now is move off from South Africa all the way to East Africa, to Kenya, where Ledama will share with us his presentation. Ledama is a marine conservationist and a global change maker. He has a deep commitment to sustainability and storytelling, and has collaborated with global media outlets like CNN and supported grassroots conservation across Kenya, Brazil, Fiji, Nigeria, and Canada. He's also a fellow South African. I can say he's an honorary South African. He spent some time in South Africa as well. Ledama, you currently are organizing philanthropic initiatives that focuses on fundraising for capacity building and biodiversity NGOs, and while engaging food security and community empowerment. So Ledama's presentation is going to show us some examples of the circular economy education programs in Kenya and why the role of education matters quite extensively in this concept and the principles of a circular economy. Over to you, Ledama.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you all and such an important topic. And I'm going to start by mentioning a pile of trash that I often think about. It's sat on a concrete platform on the Kenyan coast in a village called Kuruitu. And 4 years ago, it weighed 500 kilograms. And no one knew what to do with it. But I'll come back to that later. Now I'll go into my presentation and share my screen. Yes, so my name is Ledama Masidza. I founded Kindwell Project, which advances environmental education and community-led conservation in Kenya. And I'm also partnership manager at GEEP Africa, a systems change organization working on complex problems. Those two things, education and systems change, took me a while to see as the same job. This is what I want to explore today. Because for most of my working life, what I've actually done is stand between people who need each other and people that never met. A women's group and a recycler, a young entrepreneur, and a bank, the connective tissue. And nobody taught me how to do that. I fell into it, and I think that's something we could fix in a classroom. So in March 2022, Amina, chairperson of the Kuruitu Women's Group, and around 27 women began organizing unpaid beach cleanups several times a week. No project, no funder, no buyer. They saw the beaches they loved getting dirtier and dirtier, and they acted. But they hit a wall some of you will recognize. They had taken plastic off the beach and had nowhere to put it. This is where Oceans Alive came in. And at this time, I was environmental program manager there. We built the women's group somewhere to store and sort the trash and plastic. And within months, that platform held 500 kilograms of plastic and trash. Had not solved all the problems because, where does this plastic go? Where does the trash go? It had just been relocated. And that's where most cleanup programs quietly end. What changed next was the connection. So Oceans Alive linked the group to a coastal recycler called EcoWorld, and the women brought sorted plastic. It was weighed and they were paid by the kilogram. That is the moment where a cleanup became a circular economy, not the collecting, the buyer. And what was interesting was the women then put part of this income into a table banking fund for school fees, for emergencies, for small businesses. Plastic off that beach paid school fees. And the site also became a classroom in two ways. First was an informal or non-formal way where learners could stand inside a working circular economy and watch plastic have value. One teacher told me how she never saw her students that engaged apart from those sessions. They handled the material, they followed its journey, and worked out that they had a role in it. Later, they organized their own cleanups, they invited their parents, and it really sparked a wonderful energy. The second kind of classroom was formal. Oceans Alive was the Kenya delivery partner for Team Sayari, which was a Nat Geo Africa schools program with Wildlife Direct and USAID, working with 200 schools in East Africa. And here's the number. So 79 of these schools were able to win small grants to run their own projects. Some cleanup, some recycling, some waste management. So children did not watch a film about plastic. They watched it and then went on to build something, to do something, to act. And the women in Kuruitu were not the beneficiaries of an education program. They became its curriculum and then its teachers. Some of the best environmental educators I've worked with have never called themselves educators. So Kuruitu taught me three things. First, learning sticks when it's local, visible, and has real stakes. Second, teach the connection, not only the collection. Collecting was not the hardest part. Finding a buyer was. And third, moral motivation cannot sustain unpaid labor. The group went from 27 women to 18 because caring about the beach did not pay for transport, food, or time. And then the number. As Linda mentioned earlier, circular economy, it's not a synonym for recycling. And this is what it looks like from a beach in Kilifi County in Kenya. And Kenya's National Marine Litter Action Plan estimates that only about 32% of beach litter has a recycling market. So even if perfect collection is done, it leaves roughly 2/3 with nowhere to go. This is when this became a systems problem. not only a waste problem. And I wanted to work on that level, which is how I ended up at Wasafiri, and why one of my first programs was a collaboration with Climate Kick in Growth Africa, building a community of practice for circular economy actors in Nairobi. And here, when you think about it, the circular economy space in Nairobi, you might picture it as young and scattered, a number of organizations, enterprises, actors, people who've never met. It's actually the opposite. A rapid stocktake of the Nairobi ecosystem found at least 6 standing platforms and networks in one city. So if there's one thing Nairobi's circular economy is not short of, it's meetings. If anything, there's a bit of a surplus, and the diagnosis is still fragmentation. Everybody saw circularity from where they stood. The entrepreneurs saw markets and risks, the waste collector saw volume and income, the policymaker saw rules and infrastructure. Every view was valuable, but everyone was partial. And they had all already met repeatedly over these years. They knew each other's names, but they did not necessarily know about each other's constraints. And what Nairobi is teaching me in the work here is that familiarity is not understanding. Past a certain point, more meetings produce fatigue rather than coherence. So fragmentation, it's not only a coordination gap, it's a learning gap. By adulthood, our lenses have hardened around roles, incentives, funding, and the most powerful place to build a system and a systems view is early through education. So how do you go about building and bridging this learning gap in a system full of adults? You build a classroom. Ours was called, or is called, The Circle, developed with both Wasafiri and Climate Kick and Growth Africa to help unlock capital for circular ventures. Young enterprises are ready to grow, and the financiers say they want to invest. So both sides are willing, but the money is not really moving yet. But in one session, ventures explain what they need while the financiers listen. In the next, the roles reverse. We pair people across constituencies and ask one question: what do you see from where you stand that I probably do not? And participants set the criteria themselves. So the loudest voice does not quietly become the rubric. It's not simply networking, that's the curriculum. And somewhere along the way, our community of practice quietly became a secondary school, just with more job titles and fewer uniforms. So together, these experiences changed what I think about what circular economy should do. Number one, it should build systems literacy, seeing beyond individual actions to the structures, the actors, the relationship, who needs to be connected behind the scenes that also shape how materials, value, and power flow. Connecting the design and consumption to livelihoods, markets, infrastructure, policy, and the people whose labor usually sustains these initiatives and these drives, and very much ensuring that they don't remain invisible. And 4 principles have really helped guide some of this thinking. First is starting with real local change. Then, follow the money and the people, including who remains invisible. Then bringing other actors into the learning process as perspectives to understand, not simply as guest speakers, what relational knowledge is there also to be gained. And then also moving away from awareness to action, reflection and collaboration, and ask what must change upstream. So it's not necessarily a formula, more of an invitation to make the system visible. And here's one thing you can try next week with any age group and also no budget. I call it Trace the Object, where, with some of the learners or the colleagues you have, choose something that they throw away, then ask, what is it made from? Who designed it in that way? How did it reach us? Who touches it after we discard it, and who never gets named? Does anyone actually want it? And what rule, what price, or what missing bin would change how it ends? So take that action and see what relational links emerge from that. And to bring it to a close, what Kuruwitu and this experience in Nairobi has taught me is that secularity becomes real when people can see it where they live. Nairobi taught me that systems change begins when people learn to see beyond their own position, and that circular economy is not only a material loop, it's also a learning loop. When learners see waste, they clean it up. When learners see system, they help change what created it. So thank you so much for listening. And yes, very much thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ladama, and thanks also for that call to action. I took a screenshot. I hope everybody else did too. Next week, in your informal and formal education sessions, please try it with some of your participants, your students, your community. I think that would be really cool to trace the chain. Ladama, you spoke about the one thing that you said was environmental education should be local, visible, and has real stakes for the people that engage in it. And I wanted to ask, within the Kenyan system and Harambee, has that played any role, particularly with this women's group and how they show up and how they have essentially come together, collaborated to take this initiative forward? And how can those traditional systems essentially further help us move the needle?
A wonderful question, because really that is the fuel that drove this initial initiative. Being aware of your community, being aware where you want to be, and being able to do something about it. But along the way, we also need to expand this community to include the government actors, some of the private actors and stakeholders that are there. And sometimes it's not as easy to bring them on board. And for me, that's why I think this core root of, you mentioned Harambee, which also comes back to even the Ubuntu concept, is extremely relevant within circularity. Because once again, if you trace that one piece of plastic, how many people would it have touched? How many hands would it have gone through? So also, in order to kind of overcome this systemic challenge, we now need to bring the different stakeholders as a community together to address it.
100% agree. You've got lots of comments and praise in the chat, but I wanted to just find out if there's anybody with a specific question for Ladama at this stage. You can just drop your question in the chat. I'm not able to see any hands, so if the NAAWE team can just alert me to any question or any hand that's up for Ladama.
Cindy, Zia had a question. What is a key education tip that has helped your students' educational journey at any stage of all ages the most? So what's an education tip, Ladama? You had so much good information.
A key education tip is linking it to, what's around them. What do they encounter in their day-to-day lives, within their community? What is relevant where they are? Because that's very much something which they can connect to, they can see playing out, and they also can be able to practice within where they are. So it makes it a lot easier to get some of these learning points to be internalized when, they're connected to what is around them and, also what they can be able to go out and engage with within where they are.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, don't remove them from what they're busy doing. Keep it local, visible, and the last one has real stakes for them. So I love that education tip. So Zia, hope you got that. Thanks, Ladama. We've got a couple of other comments and questions, but I'll come back to you later for the Q&A session. What we'll do now is we'll hop straight over to West Africa, where Hobson will do a presentation for us. Hobson is a Principal Program Officer for Ghana's Environmental Protection Authority, the Ghana EPA. and is also the founder of Green Diversity Africa. Hobson has over a decade of experience in environmental policy, circular economy, waste management, and sustainability. And he has played a key role in shaping Ghana's environmental regulations and advancing community-led environmental initiatives. Very important work and a very important gentleman. Thank you so much, Hobson, for making time for us today. I will hand straight over to you for your presentation.
All right. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you, and wherever you are. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Can hear you loud and clear, Hobson. All good.
Great. So I will be taking it from the perspective of Ghana on green and circular economy solution from Ghana development perspective. And over the years, I think I'm trying to.
Can you move the screen?
Okay.
Madeline, if you can just give, yeah, there we go.
Okay. So Ghana over the years, is transitioning from the traditional linear economy to make impact in the name of circular economy. And what we are trying to do currently is to transition from the normal policy to infrastructure, private sector investment, environmental education, and then community participation. And over the years, we've been trying as much as possible to see how best we can actually use the research that have been conducted over the years to actually get something done on the ground, because it has always been the policy aspect, and we always come up with very nice policies, but then when it comes to the implementation of the policies, it becomes an issue. And that is why my portfolio, even though as a regulator, I'm still within the civil society space with the intention that whatever policy that we have in the system could also be tested to see how practical or workable those policies can be. Can you move it forward for me? Sure. Okay, that's fine. So I think I've already stated the problem that we have. Waste for us is like everywhere. Waste is not going to stop today or tomorrow. So far as we exist, definitely we are going to generate waste, and it's going to increase over the years. And recyclable materials has always become, the topic that we are discussing, even though circular economy, as we say, is not only about waste management, but it's about everything about socioeconomic development. And that is what we try as much as possible to focus on to get done. But in our situation, from the Ghanaian perspective, is the lack of infrastructure. For the policy aspect, we have them, but then the needed infrastructure to be able to transition to a more practical way of doing things, to be able to address the issue of waste management in the country. I have realized, and per some of the research that we have conducted over the years, we have realized that even though we give the people the needed education, but then they ask us at the end of the day, if you are asking somebody to do something like a segregation of their waste, and then a typical household, segregate their waste, you ask yourself, what do they do with it at the end of the day? Which means we need to find a way to, recycle these materials or find a second use for them. Can you move forward a bit for me? This is unfortunate. Okay. So when I've already spoken about the policy aspects. We have the National Plastic Waste Management Policy, and I don't know whether you've heard of the current issue in Ghana in terms of environmental management, that we have banned. By next year, we are going to ban the use of styrofoam for the production of packaging materials because of the health, impact or issues associated with it. And we have started with the awareness campaign to also sensitize the public about the impact and the need to shift away from the normal way of doing things, because we have come to realize that these single-use plastic materials has become problematic, which we need to deal with it as a country. And it will interest you to know that we have passed the new acts, and that is the Environmental Protection Act 2025, which was just recent, which is the Act 1124. And the earlier one was passed somewhere in 1994. You can imagine, 31 years down the line, we decided to say, okay, what we are doing currently, I think we need to find a way to work around it by coming out with the extended producer responsibility, which is embedded in the act, with the intention that, yes, of course, we can generate the waste. There's a common principle that says the polluter must pay. But then how do we then make sure those who are actually producing also participate in it? Initially, we were adopting the system of corporate social responsibility. And now we have moved into ESG and sustainability. And the ESG and sustainability must also then place a responsibility on the producers. And in this case, the need to be able to come out with a very functional, very workable, EPR system that will be led by the private sector, and in a way also the regulator taking some, supervisory role to ensure that it works as expected. And in Ghana, we are lucky. Currently, the Bank of Ghana, that is the Central Bank of Ghana, has taken it by coming out with about 17, sustainable principles, with the intention that at least all the financiers will also come on board and also have a critical look at their assessment when it comes to investment, to ensure that all those who are in one way or the other investing in certain areas also consider sustainability as part of their arrangement. Because now we are switching, that is from the normal way of doing things to more sustainability agenda, and which means that we must collectively play a role wherever your field is, to ensure that we actually obtain these sustainable development goals that we have signed on to. We have decided also to bring in some interventions, as I've mentioned earlier, single-use plastic control and management program, as we have introduced. The target is to, reduce the single use, which we call the problematic ones, by 50% by 2030, with the intention that at least we need to find a way to change our behavior. Because here, in Ghana, those times we used to live very well. Traditionally, we used to use a lot of leaves, for our packaging, among others. And leaves are very sustainable, and then it's friendly to the soil, and the land, water bodies, among others. But then civilization, so to call, said, okay, why don't we switch to a more, hygienic way of doing things? Then with the introduction of the plastic, and now the plastic, some are even carcinogenic, and causing a lot of, diseases, among others. And one key aspect is the flooding issue. And I don't know whether you remember what happened recently in Ghana. The entire city of Accra got flooded. And this is as a result of, clock gutters, indiscriminate, disposal of plastic waste, among others, which landed us. So it means we have a lot to do. And therefore, with a target of 50% by 2030, and then the ban of styrofoam, will be able to address our issue. Another area is the circular, ocean project that we are actually working with other partners in Europe. And I returned from there in Tenerife for the conference just last month. And the intention is to see how best we can actually look at land-based marine pollution and then address it, because whatever that we do also has some level of impact on our, marine environment. And therefore, being able to come out with a system to be able to address some of these issues will go a long way to address our, marine pollution issues. Because, I always say that environmental issues does not have boundaries. And therefore, we need to, work collectively to be able to address that. I don't know if you can move forward for me. Okay, so in Ghana, we are fortunate to also have the World Bank also supporting us with the Africa Environmental Health and Pollution Management Project, which, supported Ghana to establish about, 5 collection and dismantling centers, basically for electronic waste. And with that, because this is an emerging area, we decided to look at the infrastructure, the visioning, and also help with the setting up of the extended producer, responsibility framework. And so with that, we were not saying, oh, okay, let's look at the framework, but then how do we then make sure we practicalize whatever that we are put in the framework? So we decided to set up a prototype of how we want the infrastructure to look like. And then we got the support from the bank. And then we have one currently in Accra. We have one in Tamale. We have one in the Eastern region. We have one in also Accra, some part of Accra, in between Accra and Volta region, among others. So the intention is to see how best we can recover all these materials and dispose it in an environmentally friendly manner. Can we move forward, please? So the Green Diversity Africa aspect, the reason why I mentioned earlier that I am a very practical person, and I don't think we need to rely only on policy, but then we need to also demonstrate technology. Whatever that we want to do, whatever that we put in our policies, we put in our implementation plan, we need to make sure we practice it. And over the years, that is what I am actually advocating for. And we have had a lot of engagement with communities. We have piloted some projects within the communities. In Accra, we have one collection center at Osu. We have another one at Lakeside where I live. The intention is, how do we then, support, mobilize our people within the community to actually demonstrate what we want them to do. And by so doing, the NGO is supporting these communities to be able to collect and then dispose of these materials in an environmentally friendly manner. And then we decided that, okay, can we also make something out of it? So if we see on my left side, we have a small unit that we convert this plastic that is collected into waste bins. And the waste bins are also distributed to the community to just collect plastic and cans. And then we are trying to also add other waste streams as well, like the electronic waste, among others. And we believe that if we are able to, upscale this, it will help to be able to get the materials from the community without letting it enter into the environment in the first place. Because in Ghana, it will surprise you that somebody will even understand, get the buy-in to segregate the waste at the community level. But then you find a service provider who comes and then sum everything up and take it away. And at the end, you realize that even your effort, couldn't realize anything. And it also discourages them when you ask them to segregate their waste. Can we move forward, please? So addressing the land-based marine pollution, as I've already indicated, we have a coastline of about 550 kilometers. And recently there was an expose. I don't know how to even put it that way. But then our beaches is something that we really, need to look at it again, because it looks like the pollution over there is getting too much. And as I indicated, all the waste that we generated, we generate ends up in the sea, because if it's not properly disposed, definitely it will go through the runoff and it will end up at our beaches. And at the end of the day, we will be affected in one way or the other. And it doesn't have, just Ghana boundaries, but extend to other places as well. That is why I indicated that we need to also collectively work together to be able to address this issue. And to do that, there is a project that is ongoing, which we call the premise fuel automation project. And that project has actually established fuel dispensers across the country at the coastline areas. So we think that citing some of these facilities, just close by them will also help, because it's the same people who goes to the place or the fuel pump to get the fuel. And definitely if we set up a system there and they have waste like that, they can just hand it over to the center, and then it can be collected and then disposed in an environmentally friendly manner. Can we move forward, please? We have what we call, environmental education as the foundation in our case. We believe that environmental education is the key, because if you are able to, take the people through what is expected of them or what their responsibilities are, it becomes something that, they will, with time, to change their behavior, and then they will be very conscious about their conduct in everyday life. So we have introduced what we call the Children in Climate Change, as we call CCC. We are just to, support the students to promote, climate clubs, waste segregation, tree planting, recycling, circular economy education in schools, with the intention of providing them with the necessary, infrastructure to be able to segregate these waste and then dispose them in an environmentally friendly manner. And of course, the materials that we will recover will then be used for our waste bin production, and also pre-processing for off-takers to use it for recycling, like waste bins. So those waste bins that you see over there are waste bins that are produced in Ghana by a company called Universal Plastics. And they actually use this plastic waste to produce these waste bins. And we have also Mohinani in Ghana that is also using the plastic to also produce polytanks, among others. So gradually, at least once we collect the material, once we are able to recover the materials, we can also get use, and the infrastructure for recycling of plastic is also already in Ghana. Can we move forward, please? So key lessons. We are advocating that policy alone is insufficient without infrastructure. Community ownership accelerates circularity. Women and youth are central to green job creation. Public-private partnership development partner collaboration is essential. And then environmental educating, creates long-term behavioral transformation. Can we move forward, please? So we recommend that complete implementation of the EPR system should actually come in place to support what we are doing. And I think it's a global thing that is being discussed. And Ghana, we have also taken the lead. And then the earlier, presentation also made mention about the need to, look at extended producer responsibility to complement the government effort. Expand community waste material recovery centers. And we call it recovery centers because at the community level, that is where proper segregation and a recovery of material can actually take place. Because like I mentioned, they take the materials and then they just leave it. They put them together, they send it to a plant, and that is where they do a lot of work. And energy will be consumed, a lot of effort among others to even recover the materials. But if you're able to collect and sort it at the community level, it will be very easy. So they take the materials and it goes straight to the recycler and they work on it, And then at that community level, we can also generate some sort of employment for women and youth at the community level to also get something doing. And then integrate environmental education with practical community action, as we have already, started, which we need to upskill. And then citizen science. The people need to go there, pick things on their own. And I know other technologies are coming on board to support, citizen science for marine pollution monitoring. We need to also deepen collaboration among government, private sector, and academia and civil society. Whatever research that we are doing, and I will mention that in Ghana, that is what we are not really good at it. We like, developing all sort of, research work, but the research work only sits with the universities, and the industry don't really get the benefit of it. And that is the bridge that is the one area that we need to actually look at and make sure we bridge that gap. Can we move forward, please? So in conclusion, Ghana's experience demonstrates that achieving a circular economy requires, integrated policies, infrastructure, financing, innovation, and education. And community-based recovery centers, EPR implementation, single-use plastic reduction, e-waste management, and environmental education together provide practical pathway towards sustainable development. And this bright spot offer scalable lesson for Africa and global community. So I believe this is a very good moment for us. This is a very good time for us to collaborate because environmental issues does not have boundaries. Whatever that we do can affect Cote d'Ivoire, our neighbors, can affect Togo, our neighbors, and we need to collectively come together from all, angles to ensure we share ideas and technologies, learn from each other, like what South Africa is doing, what Kenya is doing, and then what West Africa is also working on, specifically Ghana, to share our knowledge and then transfer to each other, and then make sure we also share resources as well, that those who have technology can deploy that technology to those who don't have it, and those who have some research work can come together and work to a common objective of making the planet a very nice place for us to live. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Hobson. And I agree with some of your recommendations. We never have enough time for these webinars, and our speakers are always so interesting, and the topics that they're sharing with us and the things that we are co-learning is so valuable that sometimes, to put a time on it is sometimes very frustrating. But I do recognize that we have booked all of your time for an hour and a half, and we're approaching that phase now. There's a lot of really good questions in the chat. But what I would like each of the speakers to do is maybe Hobson, Ladama, Linda, if there's one last bit of advice that you would like to give to our participants today. And what we will do is we will collate all of the questions and share it with our speakers and ask them to respond to those for us. There are some specific questions for specific people, and then we'll share that with you with the recording. So Hobson, Ladama, Linda, is there any parting shot? 1-2 sentences from each of you, just for people to like take away with them today. Linda, shall we start with you?
Yeah, happy to. And I think education at all levels, from pre-primary, primary, high school into tertiary. This is about building awareness and education of future generations in terms of that sustainable, low carbon and circular development path going forward. I can't stress how important that is, and I don't think we're doing enough. There's still so much more to do.
100% agree with you. Ladama?
Yes, it would be being able to see the forest from the trees and also be able to see the roots beneath that. So you might be looking at something which seems immediate or direct, but what's happening beneath the surface and around it.
100%. Very, very metaphorical. Love it.
That's true.
Hobson, any last parting shots from you?
Well, what I would say is, I mean, we need to focus also more on experiential learning. And I believe that we need to demonstrate, true learning, because whatever that we want to do, whatever that we see around, whatever that we see as a way of solving our issues has got to do with practical way of doing things. Because we want to solve an issue, if we want to solve a problem, there's a challenge that we need to address physically. We need to do that. And then we need to also change our mindset and then adapt the fact that circular economy is not just about waste management, but rather a socioeconomic issue that we need to deal with to be able to manage our, these scarce resources, which we are all aware that if you don't control the way we do our things, if you don't observe what the environment needs and then provide for it, then it will get to a point that we will not even have anything to leave for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hobson. I would like to thank each of our speakers. You have been phenomenal. I have so many notes that I have to follow up with each of you in terms of like your presentations. Thank you so much to the audience that joined us today. We appreciate your engagement on the chat. There's some phenomenal questions, Linda, Ladama, Hobson. We will share all of this with you so that you can have a look and so that we can share the responses back to the participants as well as the recording. I would like to thank the NAAEE team and Caleb for putting this beautiful engagement and co-learning session together for us. For my side, I would like to thank everybody and just say have a good Thursday. Well, where are we? Tuesday. The public holiday in South Africa yesterday has thrown me off. Have a good Tuesday, evening, morning, rest of your day, and keep learning. Caleb, I don't know if there's any announcements from your side. Otherwise, thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, go for it, Caleb.
No,
No.
but definitely we have more one more webinar coming probably in October. So do all to join us in October, and then we'll send out information about that one as well. So nice to see you all. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.